Hey there. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to get started really quickly with the read CSV function from pandas so that you can import a CSV file into a pandas data frame and start analyzing it. So the first thing that you need is you will need Python installed, you will need a CSV file, and just some basic Python knowledge. And once you're equipped with that, we can get started. So here I just created a folder. It's a pd.read CSV folder that I created on my laptop. And I created my Python script right here. You can see the .py file. And I also have a file here, a CSV file called the 2013 campaign contributions. So I put this CSV file in the same folder that I put my Python script. And that's actually going to be really important because if you don't do that, you will want to take note, and it may just you'll have to adjust the path in your Python script. So let's go ahead. I'm going to open up my IDE here. This is where I'm going to be working on my Python script. I'm using Cursor, but you could be using PyCharm or VS Code or anything else. Doesn't really matter. Again, here I've opened up the folder. It's called the pd.read CSV folder, and it has those two files that I showed you. Now in my Python script here, as a matter of fact, let's just go focus on, let me hide this real quick. Let's just focus on this right now. All you need for a basic CSV read and to import that into a pandas data frame are these three lines here. So you need to import pandas. In this case, I'm importing it as PD. That's kind of the standard shorthand. And then I'm going to be storing the data in a data frame called df. So we're saying df equals PD, that's pandas module here, .read CSV, and I'm inputting the name of the file, the CSV file. Again, you can see that name's exactly the same one that's here. The reason I mentioned that where you put the file is important is because if you have your file in a different folder, this will not run. So typically you may have, for example, your data in a subfolder in your kind of main folder. It might be called like data. And so instead of having it be 2013 campaign, you may have to have this be something like data 2013 campaign and so on and so forth. If the data is in a completely different directory and you can't use a relative path, you have to use maybe an absolute path that will look something like this. So just be mindful of where you're putting your file because that will impact this here. Now the third line is we're simply printing the data just so I can display it, and we're going to be looking at the first 10 rows. And if I run this, I will see my data. And I'm maybe just taking a step back, and I should have showed you here. This is my CSV data. It's just some publicly available New York campaign data from the contribution data from the 2013 campaign. You can see it's just a CSV, pretty straightforward, has a header. And then when I'm importing that and viewing, let me just remove that. When I'm looking at the top 10 fields here, I can see my fields nicely displayed. So that's really it. That's the basic form of importing a CSV file into a pandas data frame. There are some really kind of nifty additional parameters that are commonly used. So just to show you here, let's go ahead and start looking at some of these. If you have a header that's maybe not on the first row for whatever reason, then you may want to specify, starting with 0 as being the first row, you may want to specify that. This comes in handy when, for example, you're exporting a file from Excel as a CSV, because sometimes folks will have like a first row that's kind of like a macro header and then sort of subheader. So you may need that one if you're exporting again from Excel. I'm not going to use that here because I'll just have one header. Here with this parameter, you can limit the number of rows. So that's really helpful if you have a really large file and you're just like, I just want to inspect it. It'll speed things up. So if you have millions of rows, this might be a good thing to consider. You do have ways to, as a matter of fact, let me run this. So I'm going to rerun it. You can see here, I have head 10, so I'm supposed to be showing the first 10 rows, but I limited it to 3 rows, so I can only see 3 rows and the header. So that's how this works. There are other ways that we cover in our article about how to chunk larger files if you have to. So if you're starting to deal with like a really large CSV, there are some other mechanisms that you may want to consider. As a matter of fact, I'll also go ahead and say that if you're dealing with like really large CSV files, maybe you shouldn't be using CSV. You may want to consider like Parquet, for example, which DuckDB handles really well. You may also want to just consider using a data warehouse and querying using SQL, which we cover extensively as well on our blog. The last one I'll show you here today is you can also handle errors gracefully using the read CSV. This will kind of skip bad lines. So this can be helpful if you're dealing with like some weird syntax or there's like some encoding in the file. I will say though, just be aware that when you're doing this, you kind of tend to ignore the error a little bit. So this is fine if you know what you're doing and you know why you're ignoring those errors, but just make sure you're not like missing data or missing rows because you're doing this. So that's pretty much it. You can get sophisticated from here. There's all sorts of other things you can do. And of course, once you have your data frame, you can start plotting histograms, plotting data, analyzing the data. That's the whole point of using Python. I also wanted to, and I'll mention a few more things here. So again, Parquet, great file format to look at if you're dealing with like larger files. Definitely consider using a SQL reader. You can also import Excel files directly. Sorry, when I say SQL reader, let's back up for a second. What I mean is using Python to query a data warehouse or database directly using SQL rather than like doing an export and then re-importing that. We also cover that in one of our blog posts. And you can also import Excel files directly as well. So if you do find yourself exporting an Excel file as a CSV just to re-import it back into Python, you can probably skip that step. Excel does come with its own quirks. Again, this is why you may need some error handling or some special parameters, because you can do all sorts of funky stuff in Excel that you can't in a CSV, like merging rows and columns and adding some formatting and formulas. So there's a little bit more to it, but you can also just import the Excel file directly. The last thing I'll show you here is if all you're trying to do is just import a file and analyze it, definitely check out ChatGPT or Claude. Those are great solutions. You can upload a CSV file. You can even upload an Excel file. You can even connect directly to Google Drive, and the AI can analyze your data using Python behind the scenes. So that's really great if you aren't that comfortable with Python and you just want to like do some more advanced analysis that you can't do in say a spreadsheet. You can also use Fabi. So in Fabi, you just create a new smart book, create an account, it's free. And when you go and upload a file, let's go ahead and do that here. Here I'm looking at my Panda read CSV folder. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and upload the campaign data, hit open. Let's give us a few seconds here to upload. Okay, here we go. Almost done uploading. And there we go. So now we've uploaded a file to a SmartBook, and it's actually, so it's using SQL to read the file, and it's actually storing in DuckDB. That's a bit of a detail behind the scenes. But the cool part is that it's actually being stored, the data is being stored as a Python data frame right here called DataFrame 1. And now you can start analyzing that data using Python. So you can come in here and you can say print, let's do the exact same thing as a matter of fact that we just did here, right? So we're just going to do the print df. Instead of df, it's DataFrame 1, DataFrame 1 dot head 10. So if I do that and run this, you'll see we get the exact same results. So now I can start using, I don't have to do any of the import stuff. It just automatically stores it as DataFrame. And then the cool part here too is that you can start using AI to plot and analyze the data. So how many individual contributors, were there, and it will generate some Python code leveraging the DataFrame 1 automatically for you, and then you can, well, it's actually writing some SQL here, but you can also ask it to write Python, and it will just automatically, okay, it's auto debugging here. There we go. So it's actually just reusing DataFrame as a SQL query to give me the answer. So anyways, that's a quick tutorial. Hopefully this gets you up and running quickly. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them down below.